The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor, crystal fragments catching the light like fallen stars. Sebastian Rothwell watched the amber liquid seep into the pristine white stone, thinking how perfectly it represented his life. Beautiful. On the surface, fractured underneath. "Sir, shall I call housekeeping?" His assistant's voice cut through the silence of the penthouse. Sebastian's reflection stared back at him from the floor-to-ceiling windows. Manhattan's glittering skyline. Spreading behind him like a backdrop he'd grown tired of admiring. "I'll handle it." Rachel hesitated at the doorway, her tablet clutched against her chest. In 5 years of working for him, she'd learned to read the subtle signs of his moods. Tonight felt different, dangerous almost. "The hospital called again about tomorrow's ceremony," she ventured. "Dr. Wells wanted to confirm your arrival time for the pediatric wing dedication." Sebastian turned from the window, his dark eyes holding a weight that made Rachel shift uncomfortably. At 38, he commanded rooms with just his presence. His tailored suits and calculated movements speaking of power that could reshape cities, yet something hollow lived behind his carefully constructed facade. $10 million? He said quietly. "Do you know what that means to me, Rachel?" She blinked, uncertain where this was leading. "It's a generous donation, sir. The children will benefit tremendously. It's less than what I spend on wine in a year." He stepped over the broken glass, his Italian leather shoes making no sound on the marble. "My father built this empire believing money could solve everything. Anything. Fix anyone." The grandfather clock in the corner chimed midnight, its deep notes echoing through rooms designed for entertaining hundreds but occupied by one. Sebastian had dismissed his staff hours ago, preferring solitude to their practiced smiles and careful deference. "Sir, perhaps you should get some rest," Rachel suggested gently. "Tomorrow's schedule is quite full."
Yes.
Sebastian laughed, the sound sharp and brittle. "Board meetings, investor calls, photo opportunities. The same performance I've given. Every day for 5 years." He moved to his bar, considering another drink before thinking better of it. "Tell me something, Rachel. When you go home to your husband and children, do you feel alive?" The question caught her off guard. Sebastian rarely asked personal questions, maintaining the careful distance between employer and employee that his world demanded. "Do, sir," she answered honestly. "Even when I'm exhausted. Even when the bills pile up and Tommy needs help with homework and Sarah's crying about something at school. It feels real." Real. The word hung in the air like an accusation. Sebastian couldn't remember the last time anything in his life had felt real. Every interaction was filtered through his wealth, every relationship contaminated by what he could provide rather than who he was. "The hospital ceremony," he said finally. "Make sure we have time to actually tour the pediatric ward. Watch the ribbon cutting and press photos." Rachel made a note on her tablet, surprised by the request. Usually, Sebastian preferred to minimize his time at these events, arriving punctually for the cameras and leaving as soon as protocol allowed. "Of course, sir, Dr. Wells will be pleased. She mentioned wanting to show you how your donation is being used." After Rachel left, Sebastian stood alone in his $15 million apartment, surrounded by art worth more than most people's homes, feeling poorer than he ever had. The city below pulsed with life while he existed in his gilded cage. Watching from behind glass that might as well have been prison bars, he thought about his father, James Rothwell, who had died believing he was leaving his son everything that mattered: the company, the wealth, the influence, to shape the world according to his vision. But James had never understood that in building his empire. He'd forgotten to teach his son how to live in it. Sebastian walked to his bedroom, passing photographs that documented a life of achievements without joy. Awards, handshakes with politicians, charity events where he smiled for cameras while feeling nothing inside. Tomorrow would bring another performance, another carefully orchestrated display of generosity that would generate positive press and tax benefits, while changing nothing about the emptiness that consumed him. But as he prepared for sleep in sheets that cost more than most cars, Sebastian couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting. The champagne glass lay in pieces on his floor, and for the first time in years, he had no desire to have someone else clean up the mess. Perhaps it was time to let something break. Perhaps it was time to see what lived beneath the perfect surface he'd spent his life maintaining. The city lights twinkled beyond his windows, and somewhere in that vast expanse of humanity, people were living real lives, feeling real emotions, making real connections. Tomorrow, he would step into their world, if only for a few hours. Tomorrow, everything might change. The flash of cameras erupted like artificial lightning as Sebastian stepped from his black Bentley, the familiar weight of performance settling over his shoulders like a well-tailored coat. Dr. Patricia Wells approached with the practiced enthusiasm of someone who knew exactly how much his $10 million donation meant to her hospital's future. "Mr. Rothwell, welcome to Children's Memorial," she beamed, her handshake firm and rehearsed. "The entire staff is thrilled about the new pediatric wing." Sebastian nodded, allowing himself to be guided through the gleaming corridors, while photographers documented his every step. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and hope, a combination that somehow felt more honest than the expensive cologne and desperation that permeated his usual social circles. "The new wing will allow us to treat twice as many children," Dr. Wells continued, her voice pitched for the trailing reporters. "Your generosity is literally saving lives." The word should have meant something. It would have meant something to his father, who collected philanthropic achievements like trophies. But Sebastian felt only the familiar numbness that accompanied these orchestrated displays of charity. Then he heard the laughter. It cut through the administrative chatter and camera clicks like sunlight through storm clouds. Pure, genuine joy that made Sebastian stop walking despite the entourage behind him. The sound drew him toward an open doorway, where a young woman in blue scrubs knelt beside a hospital bed, her voice bringing a fairy tale to life. And the princess knew that real magic didn't come from wands or crowns, she was saying, her hands moving expressively as she spoke. It came from kindness and courage, and believing that tomorrow could be better than today. The little girl in the bed wore a bright pink headscarf, her face pale, but eyes bright with wonder. Despite the 4 lines and medical equipment surrounding her, she giggled at the nurse's animated storytelling, momentarily transported from her world of treatments and uncertainty. "That's Sophia Martinez," Dr. Wells explained, following Sebastian's gaze. "One of our finest nurses. She has a gift with the children that you simply can't teach." Sebastian found himself stepping closer, drawn by something he couldn't name. The nurse had warm brown eyes and a smile that seemed to light up the sterile room from within. When she noticed the group of suits watching her, she didn't appear intimidated or starstruck like most people who encountered his wealth and status. "Mr. Rothwell," she said simply, rising gracefully from her position beside the bed, "thank you for making this wing possible.
Ow.
These children will have so much more space to heal and play." Her gratitude felt different. Not the rehearsed appreciation he usually encountered, but something authentic that focused on the patients rather than the donor. As she spoke, her attention kept drifting back to the little girl, whose eyes had grown heavy from the story. "It's sleep." "Well, Isabella," Sophia whispered, adjusting the child's blanket with practiced tenderness, "I'll finish the story tomorrow." The child smiled sleepily. "Will the princess find her happy ending?" "The best princesses always do," Sophia assured her. "They just have to be brave enough to recognize it when it comes." Sebastian felt something shift inside his chest, a crack in the armor he'd built. Around his heart, here was someone who measured success, not in dollars or influence, but in the comfort she could bring to sick children. Someone whose work had meaning beyond profit margins and tax benefits. After the ceremony concluded and the photographers departed, Sebastian dismissed his security detail and driver, claiming he needed to review some documents. In reality, he was hoping to encounter the nurse again, drawn by a curiosity he hadn't felt in years. He found Sophia in the break room, sitting alone with medical textbooks spread across a small table. She was studying while eating a simple sandwich, her dedication evident in every focused line of her face. "Preparing for continuing education exams," she explained when he approached, closing her textbook with a tired smile. "I'm working toward my nurse practitioner certification." Sebastian was surprised by her ambition. Most people in his world inherited their positions or used connections to advance. This woman was earning her future through determination and hard work. "The children seem to love you," he observed, taking a seat across from her. "They're my inspiration," she replied, her eyes softening. "Every day they show incredible courage, facing challenges that would break most adults. They teach me more about strength than any medical journal ever could." Her words carried a weight that expensive education couldn't purchase. Sebastian realized he was in the presence of someone genuinely special, not because of her bank account or social connections, but because of her character. As their conversation continued, Sebastian learned about Sophia's life. She worked double shifts to support her younger sister Emma's college tuition, putting family first, despite her own dreams of career advancement. She lived in a modest apartment in Queens, took the subway to work, and saved every penny for Emma's education. Her world was so different from his gilded cage, yet it possessed something his lacked completely: purpose and genuine human connection. When she spoke about her patients or her sister, her eyes sparkled with a light that no amount of money could purchase. "I have a rather unusual request," Sebastian said suddenly, surprising himself with his boldness. The Crystal Heart Gala invitation sat in his jacket pocket, another social obligation he typically endured rather than enjoyed. "Would you consider being my guest at the Crystal Heart Gala this Saturday evening?" Sophia's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. "I think I misheard you. It's a charity event for children's causes. I thought you might find it interesting from a professional perspective." The silence stretched between them as Sophia processed his unexpected invitation. Sebastian watched emotions play across her face: surprise, confusion, and something that might have been excitement before practical concerns took over. "Mr. Rothwell, I appreciate the invitation, but I'm not sure that's appropriate," she said carefully. "We live in very different worlds." "That's exactly the point," Sebastian replied. "I spend my evenings surrounded by people who measure worth in stock portfolios and property values. You measure it in lives saved and children comforted. I think I could learn something from your perspective." Sophia studied his face, searching for hidden motives or signs that this was some elaborate joke. She found only sincerity in his dark eyes, a vulnerability that seemed at odds with his powerful reputation. "I wouldn't know how to act at such an event," she admitted. "I don't own anything suitable to wear, and I've never been part of high society." "You don't need to act like anyone other than yourself," Sebastian assured her. "As for attire, that's easily arranged. I have a personal shopper who would be delighted to help." The offer hung in the air between them, like a bridge across two different worlds. Sophia thought about her cramped apartment, her student loans, her sister's tuition, bills. This man could probably solve all her financial problems with pocket change, but that wasn't what drew her to consider his proposal. There was something lonely in his eyes, something that resonated with her own feelings of being trapped by circumstances beyond her control. Perhaps they both needed to step outside their familiar boundaries. One evening, she said finally, "Just to support the children's charity aspect." Sebastian's smile transformed his entire face, making him appear years younger. "Just one evening," he agreed, though something in his tone suggested he hoped for more. "Yes." Sophia returned to her rounds, and Sebastian headed back to his corporate world. Neither fully understood the magnitude of what they had set in motion. The Crystal Heart Gala would become the night that challenged everything Manhattan's high society believed about worth, class, and the power of authentic human connection. Sophia stared at her reflection in the boutique's gilded mirror, feeling like an imposter wrapped in midnight blue silk. The personal shopper Sebastian had arranged a sophisticated woman named Claire, circled her like an artist examining a masterpiece. "Absolutely stunning," Claire murmured, adjusting the gown's elegant drape. "The color brings out your eyes beautifully. Mr. Rothwell has exquisite taste." The dress cost more than Sophia made in 3 months, its price tag a reminder of the vast chasm between her world and Sebastian's. Yet as she moved, the silk flowed like water, making her feel graceful in a way her practical scrubs never could. "I still don't understand why he invited me," Sophia confessed, watching Claire fasten a diamond necklace around her throat. The stones caught the light, sending rainbow fragments dancing across the walls. "Perhaps he's tired of pretense," Claire suggested, stepping back to admire her work. "In my experience, the wealthiest clients are often the loneliest. They're surrounded by people who want something from them, but but rarely meet anyone who sees them as simply human. The observation struck Sophia with unexpected force. She thought about Sebastian's eyes during their conversation at the hospital, how they'd seemed hungry for something that had nothing to do with money or status. Perhaps Claire was right. Perhaps beneath the expensive suits and calculated public appearances lived someone as trapped by circumstances as she was. 3 hours later, Sophia descended the steps of her modest Queen's apartment building, feeling like Cinderella approaching her carriage. A black limousine waiting at the curb drew curious stares from neighbors, but Sophia barely noticed. Her reflection in the car's tinted windows showed a woman she barely recognized, transformed by silk and diamonds into someone who might actually belong at Manhattan's most exclusive social event. Sebastian waited inside the limousine, and when his eyes met hers, the breath caught in his throat. The hospital nurse had been lovely in her quiet, natural way, but this woman was breathtaking. The midnight blue gown highlighted her graceful movements, while the diamonds at her throat caught the city lights streaming past the windows. "You look incredible," he said softly, and Sophia felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I feel like I'm playing dress-up," she admitted. "What if I say the wrong thing? What if people realize I don't belong?" Sebastian reached across the space between them, his fingers brushing hers in a gesture both comforting and electric. "You belong more than anyone else who will be there tonight. You've earned your place through dedication and compassion, not inheritance or social connections." The Crystal Heart Gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum, its grand halls transformed into a glittering wonderland. As they ascended the marble steps, Sophia felt the weight of hundreds of eyes upon them. Conversations paused, heads turned. She could almost hear the whispered speculation about Sebastian Rothwell's mysterious companion. "Just breathe," Sebastian murmured near her ear, his hand warm against the small of her back. "They're only human, despite what their bank accounts might suggest." The ballroom overwhelmed Sophia's senses. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow light across walls lined with priceless art, while Manhattan's elite mingled in designer gowns and perfectly tailored tuxedos. The scent of expensive perfume and champagne filled the air, creating an atmosphere of rarefied luxury that felt as foreign as another planet. "Sebastian, darling." A woman's voice cut through the ambient chatter. Victoria Ashford approached with predatory grace, her silver gown probably costing more than most cars. Her smile was sharp as broken glass as she appraised Sophia with calculating eyes. "Victoria," Sebastian replied politely, though Sophia noticed the tension in his posture. "May I introduce Sophia Martinez?" "Sophia, this is Victoria Ashford, one of the gala's organizers." "Charming," Victoria purred, though her tone suggested anything but charm. "And what do you do, dear?" "I'm a pediatric nurse at Children's Memorial Hospital," Sophia replied, lifting her chin with quiet pride. Victoria's eyebrows arched in surprise. "How wonderfully altruistic, though I suppose someone has to tend to the less fortunate." The dismissal in her voice was subtle but unmistakable. Sophia felt Sebastian tense beside her, but before he could respond, she smiled with genuine warmth. "Actually, I consider myself the fortunate one. Working with sick children teaches you what real courage looks like. Most adults couldn't handle what these kids face every day with such grace and humor." Her words carried such authentic conviction that Victoria's practiced superiority faltered. Other guests within earshot turned to listen, drawn by the sincerity in Sophia's voice. "Those children have shown me that strength isn't about how much you can acquire," Sophia continued, "but how much you can give, even when you have very little to offer." The nearby conversations had stilled, Manhattan's elite finding themselves captivated by this woman who spoke of wealth in terms they'd never considered. Sebastian watched with growing admiration as Sophia's natural grace and genuine passion commanded attention in a way that money never could. "How refreshing," murmured an elderly gentleman Sophia didn't recognize. "It's been years since I've heard someone speak so passionately about their work." As the evening progressed, Sophia found herself surrounded by curious socialites, eager to hear her stories from the hospital. She spoke about Isabella, the little girl with the pink headscarf who dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. About Marcus, who at 8 years old, comforted newer patients with the wisdom of someone twice his age. about children who face mortality. With more courage than most adults ever mustered, Sebastian remained close, watching the transformation taking place around them. These people, who typically discuss stock prices and property values with casual indifference, were hanging on every word about sick children they'd never meet. Sophia's authenticity was infectious, reminding them of purposes beyond profit. Margins and social climbing. "Your nurse is extraordinary," Victoria whispered to Sebastian. During a brief moment when Sophia was deep in conversation with a group of fascinated donors, the earlier disdain had vanished, replaced by genuine admiration. "She is," Sebastian agreed, his eyes never leaving Sophia's animated face as she described a successful treatment that had allowed a young patient to return home to his family. But even as the evening unfolded successfully, Sebastian sensed undercurrents of tension. Whispered conversations paused when he approached, and knowing glances passed between certain guests. His world operated on unspoken rules and careful hierarchies. And bringing Sophia here had disrupted the established order in ways he was only beginning to understand. The real test would come when the evening's pleasantries gave way to harder truths. When Manhattan's elite decided whether to embrace or reject this intrusion of authenticity into their carefully constructed realm of privilege. As the orchestra began playing, Keppels moved toward the dance floor. Sebastian extended his hand to Sophia. "Shall we?" She hesitated, suddenly aware of the hundreds of eyes watching their every move. "I've never danced at anything like this before." "Neither have I," Sebastian replied softly. "Not really. Most of these dances are just performance. This would be different." Sophia placed her hand in his, and as they moved on to the polished marble floor, both sensed they were crossing more than just a physical threshold. They were stepping into territory that would change them both forever, for better or worse. The music swirled around them, and Manhattan's most powerful people watched from the shadows, waiting to see what would happen when two worlds collided. On the dance floor of the city's most exclusive social event, the music ended, but Sebastian and Sophia remained in each other's arms, lost in a moment that felt separate from the glittering crowd surrounding them. When reality intruded through the whispered conversations and pointed stares, they reluctantly stepped apart. "Thank you," Sophia whispered, her cheeks flushed from the dance and something deeper. That was magical. Before Sebastian could respond, a familiar voice cut through the ambient chatter like a blade. Well, Sebastian Rothwell slumming with the help." They turned to find Marcus Whitmore approaching, his tuxedo immaculate and his smile predatory. Sebastian's oldest friend from prep school, now his biggest business rival, had clearly been drinking enough to abandon his usual pretense of civility. "Marcus," Sebastian warned, his voice low and dangerous. "Oh, don't be so sensitive." Marcus laughed, loud enough to draw attention from nearby guests. "We all know how this works. Rich man feels guilty about his wealth. Finds some noble poor girl to make himself feel better. It's practically a cliché." Sophia felt the blood drain from her face as conversations around them began to pause. The magical evening was dissolving into nightmare, and she could see the calculation in Marcus's eyes as he sensed weakness. "The question is," Marcus continued, swirling his champagne, "what does the poor little nurse get out of it?" "The dress and jewelry, of course. I imagine the financial incentives are quite generous." "That's enough." Sebastian's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. But Marcus was too drunk on alcohol and malice to care. "Come now, we're all adults here. Miss Martinez, surely you understand the arrangement?" "Sebastian, it gets to feel noble. You get to pay off those student loans, and maybe buy a better apartment. Everyone wins." The implication hit Sophia like a physical blow. Around them, she could see guests leaning in, hungry for scandal in their perfectly ordered world. She felt exposed, stripped bare of the confidence the evening had built in her. "You have no idea what you're talking about," Sophia said quietly, but her voice carried clearly in the sudden hush. "Don't I?" Marcus's smile turned cruel. "I did my research after seeing the photos from the hospital ceremony. Nursing school debt, working double shifts, supporting a sister through college. It's actually quite touching the lengths people will go to climb out of poverty." Sebastian stepped forward, his hands clenched into fists. "Say another word and I'll destroy you." "With what?" Your moral authority? Marcus laughed. Both know you're just like your father, Sebastian. Everything has a price. Everyone has a price. The only difference is you prefer to buy your conscience. Along with your companionship, the words hung in the crystalline air like poison. Sophia felt the stares of hundreds of people, their judgment and speculation pressing against her like a physical weight. The beautiful gown that had made her feel like a princess now felt like a costume, the diamonds at her throat like a collar marking her as property. "Excuse me," she whispered, pushing through the crowd toward the museum's exit. The grand staircase. Blurred through tears, she refused to let fall until she was outside, away from the crushing weight of their contempt. Sebastian found her on the museum steps, the night air sharp against her bare shoulders. The city stretched before them, millions of lights twinkling like false promises. "Sophia, please," he said, reaching for her hand. "Don't let Marcus poison what happened tonight. He's drunk and bitter and jealous." She pulled away from his touch, the movement cutting him deeper than any physical blow. Is he wrong, though? About the arrangement? About what people will think? You know he is. You know what tonight meant? What you mean to me. Sophia turned to face him, and Sebastian saw his reflection in her tear-bright eyes. Do I? Right now I feel exactly like what he said I was. A purchased companion, a charity case, dressed up to make you feel better about your wealth. That's not true, and you know it, is it? She gestured back toward the museum where the gala continued. Without them? Look at what just happened. I don't belong in there, Sebastian. I never did. I was fooling myself, thinking I could fit into your world. Then don't, Sebastian said desperately. Come into my world instead. Stay with me. Let me take care of your sister's education, your student loans. Let me give you the life you deserve. The offer hung between them like a bridge over an abyss, and Sophia stared at him with something approaching horror. You don't understand, she whispered. Exactly what Marcus said you'd do. That's exactly what makes this feel like a transaction instead of something real. Sebastian felt his world tilting off its axis. Everything he'd built his life on, the power of wealth to solve problems and smooth paths, was useless here. Worse than useless, it was actively destroying the only genuine connection he'd felt in years. I love you, he said desperately, the words torn from some deep place he'd kept locked away. Not what you represent, not what you make me feel about myself. You, the woman who reads fairy tales to sick children and works double shifts for her sister's dreams. The woman who made a room full of cynical socialites remember what compassion looks like. Sophia closed her eyes, and when she opened them, Sebastian saw his own heartbreak reflected there. I love you too, she whispered. That's what makes this so impossible. Every gift you give me, every problem you solve with money will remind us both of the inequality between us. Every time we're together in public, people will assume what Marcus assumed. I'll always be the poor nurse who trapped the rich philanthropist. I don't care what people think. You say that now, but you will. Eventually, you'll start to wonder too, whether I stay because I love you or because I love what you can provide. The doubt will poison everything, just like it's poisoning us. Right now, Sebastian reached for her again, and this time she didn't pull away. Her hands were cold in his, trembling with emotion in the October night air. So what do? He asked, his voice breaking. Pretend tonight never happened? Go back to our separate worlds and act like we never found each other? I don't know, Sophia admitted. But I know I can't be your beautiful charity case, and you can't be my wealthy savior. If there's going to be an us, it has to be between equals. And right now, with the world watching and judging, I don't know how that's possible. She stood on her toes and kissed him once, softly, her lips tasting of tears and lost possibilities. Then she walked down the museum steps, her midnight blue gown flowing behind her like liquid shadow. Sebastian watched her disappear into the city's embrace, feeling more alone than he ever had in his gilded penthouse. Behind him, the gala continued. Manhattan's elite already crafting the narrative of Sebastian Rothwell's scandalous evening with the mysterious nurse. But as he stood in the cold October air, surrounded by the ruins of the most important night of his life, Sebastian realized something profound had shifted. For the first time in years, he felt fully awake. even if awakening meant confronting the limitations of everything he'd believed about love, worth, and the power of wealth to buy. Happiness. The real question was whether he had the courage to change, not just his circumstances, but himself. Whether he could become the man worthy of Sophia Martinez's love, even if it meant abandoning everything that had defined Sebastian Rothwell. In the distance, the city pulsed with life, indifferent to the heartbreak playing out on museum steps. But somewhere in that vast expanse of humanity, two people who had found something real were about to discover whether love could survive the collision of their worlds, or whether some gaps were simply too wide to bridge. 3 weeks passed like a fever dream. Sebastian threw himself into work with desperate intensity, acquiring companies and restructuring deals with the mechanical precision that had built his empire. But the numbers on spreadsheets blurred together. And boardroom victories felt hollow as ashes. Every morning brought newspaper speculation about his mystery nurse, each article more invasive than the last. Photographers lurked outside Children's Memorial Hospital, hoping to catch glimpses of Sophia for their scandalous stories. The attention made Sebastian sick, knowing his world had invaded hers with its poison. Rachel found him in his office at midnight, staring out at the city lights that no longer held any magic. "Sir, you should go home," she said gently. "You've been here for 18 hours? Home to what?" Sebastian asked without turning around. "Another empty penthouse. Another bottle of wine that costs more than most people's rent? Another night of pretending any of this matters?" Rachel hesitated, then pulled out her tablet. "The hospital called. They wanted to thank you again for the donation, and to let you know that the Pediatric Wing's opening ceremony went beautifully. Apparently, Miss Martinez organized a special program where the children performed songs for the donors who couldn't attend." Sebastian's reflection stared back at him from the window, hollow-eyed and haunted. How is she? Working double shifts. According to the hospital administrator, apparently she's been taking on extra hours to avoid the media attention. Photographers finally gave up after the first week. Shame burned in Sebastian's chest. His world had touched hers and left, contamination in its wake. Sophia was working herself to exhaustion, hiding from cameras that existed only because she'd made the mistake of caring about him. "I destroyed her life," he said quietly. "Did you?" "From what I understand, she's being promoted to head of pediatric patient advocacy." The hospital board was impressed by how she handled the media attention with such grace and dignity. Several major donors specifically requested that their contributions support her department. Sebastian turned from the window, something stirring in his chest that might have been hope. "What do you mean?"
No.
Rachel pulled up news articles on her tablet, scrolling past the sensational headlines to find the real stories buried beneath the scandal. "Look at this interview she gave to the Times. She refused to discuss your relationship, but she talked extensively about the children's needs and the importance of pediatric care. The article generated more donations in 1 week than the hospital usually sees in 6 months." Sebastian read Sophia's quoted words, recognizing the passion and authenticity that had captivated him from their first meeting. Even under siege from tabloid photographers and gossip columnists, she'd found a way to turn the attention towards something meaningful. "She's remarkable," he whispered. "Yes, sir, which makes what I'm about to suggest even more important." She closed her tablet and met his eyes directly. "You need to make a choice. Either fight for her properly or let her go completely. This half measure of staying away while torturing yourself isn't helping anyone." Sebastian knew she was right. For 3 weeks he'd been paralyzed between his love for Sophia and his fear that his wealth would always poison whatever they built together. But perhaps the real question wasn't whether money would complicate their relationship, but whether their love was strong enough to survive the complication. The next morning, Sebastian did something unprecedented. He walked into his boardroom and announced his intention to step down as CEO of Rothwell Industries. The silence that followed was deafening. "Sebastian, think about what you're saying," urged James Morrison, the company's longest-serving board member. "This is your father's legacy, your birthright." "My father built this company because he wanted to create something meaningful," Sebastian replied. "But somewhere along the way it became about accumulating wealth rather than creating value. I want to return to the original mission." Over the following hours, Sebastian outlined his plan. He would maintain a controlling interest in Rothwell Industries but transition operational control to a management team. His personal wealth would fund a new foundation focused on healthcare access for underserved communities, with particular emphasis on pediatric care. You're walking away from billions of dollars. Victoria Ashford said when news of his decision spread through Manhattan's social circles. They met at his penthouse, her expression equal parts admiration and horror. I'm walking towards something more valuable, Sebastian replied. I'm not walking away from the money, Victoria. I'm putting it to work in ways that actually matter. The foundation's first initiative would be funding free healthcare clinics in underserved neighborhoods. With integrated pediatric specialists and educational programs, Sebastian had spent weeks researching similar projects, learning how to leverage his resources for maximum impact rather than maximum publicity. But the foundation was only part of his plan. The harder part, the part that terrified him more than any business deal, was what came next. He found Sophia exactly where he'd expected to. Reading 2 children in the newly opened pediatric wing, her voice brought the same magic to fairy tales. That had first captivated him, though shadows under her eyes spoke of exhaustion that went beyond long work hours. Once upon a time, she was saying to a circle of young patients, there was a princess who discovered that the most powerful magic wasn't in her crown or her castle, but in her courage to choose love over fear. The children hung on every word, their faces bright with hope despite the medical equipment surrounding them. When Sophia finished the story, they applauded with the enthusiasm that only children could muster. Miss Sophia asked Isabella, the little girl with the pink headscarf who had grown stronger in the weeks since Sebastian's first visit, do you think the princess ever gets scared? Oh yes, Sophia replied, gathering the books as the children were helped back to their rooms by other nurses. The bravest princesses are the ones who feel scared but choose to be courageous anyway. Like you when the cameras were here. Sophia's smile faltered slightly. The media attention had been overwhelming, turning her private life into public speculation. But she'd endured it because running would have meant abandoning these children who needed her. Something like that, she said softly. Miss Martinez? Sophia turned to find Sebastian standing in the doorway. And her heart performed the same painful leap it had every time she'd seen him over the past 3 weeks. He looked different somehow, less polished and more human. His usual perfect composure had cracks in it that revealed something vulnerable underneath. Mr. Rothwell, her voice was carefully neutral, though she couldn't hide the way her hands trembled as she clutched the storybooks. Could I speak with you, please? Sophia glanced around the ward, aware of the curious stares from staff members who had watched the media circus surrounding them. I'm still on shift for another hour. I'll wait. He did wait, sitting in the same break room where they'd first talked, looking oddly out of place among the worn furniture and outdated magazines. When Sophia finally joined him after her shift ended, exhaustion lined her face like watercolor shadows. You look tired, he said softly. Double shifts, she replied, settling into the chair across from him with careful distance. The promotion came with more responsibilities. I heard about that. Congratulations. Head of Pediatric Patient Advocacy is a significant achievement. Thank you. Her formality cut deeper than anger would have. Was there something specific you needed to discuss? Sebastian had rehearsed this conversation dozens of times. But facing Sophia's guarded expression, all his carefully planned words evaporated. I resigned as CEO of Rothwell Industries, he said abruptly. Sophia blinked, clearly taken aback. You what? I'm starting a foundation, healthcare access for underserved communities, with a focus on pediatric care. The first clinic will be here in Queens, 5 blocks from your apartment. Sebastian, you can't just reorganize your entire life because of what happened between us. I'm not. He leaned forward, his intensity breaking through her defenses despite her efforts to remain distant. I'm reorganizing my life because you showed me what I'd been missing. Purpose, real connection, the chance to build something that matters. More than stock prices or social status? Sophia shook her head, though Sebastian could see uncertainty flickering in her eyes. This doesn't change the fundamental problem. You're still Sebastian Rothwell, heir to billions. I'm still a nurse from Queens who takes the subway to work. Are those the only things that define us? Sebastian asked. Because when I think about you, I don't see a poor nurse. I see a woman who makes sick children laugh, who works herself to exhaustion for her family's dreams, who stood in a room full of Manhattan's elite and reminded them what compassion looks like. And when you think about yourself, Sebastian was quiet for a long moment. I used to see my father's son, heir to an empire, someone whose worth was measured in acquisitions and influence. But you made me see someone different. Someone who could choose meaning over money, connection over control. Pretty words, Sophia said, though her voice lacked conviction. But words don't change reality. Your world will always see me as the gold digger who trapped Sebastian Rothwell. Mine will always wonder what I had to give up to be with you. Then maybe we need to build a new world, Sebastian replied. One where worth isn't measured by bank accounts or social pedigree, but by the impact we have on the lives around us. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder, placing it on the table between them. The Foundation's first project. It's a pediatric clinic that will serve this community free of charge, with attached research facilities and training programs. For nurses pursuing advanced degrees, Sophia opened the folder, her eyes widening as she read the detailed plans. The clinic would revolutionize healthcare access for the neighborhood's children, providing services that currently required expensive trips to Manhattan hospitals. I want you to run it, Sebastian continued. Not as my girlfriend or my charity case, but as the most qualified person I know, someone who understands both the medical needs and the community dynamics. Someone who can build trust where institutions have failed before. This is incredible, Sophia whispered, turning pages that outlined comprehensive care programs, educational initiatives, and community outreach efforts. But I can't accept this. Not from you. Not like this. Why not? Because it feels like another version of the same problem. You solving my challenges with money, me benefiting from your wealth. Is this different from Marcus's accusations? Sebastian stood and walked to the break room's single window, looking out at the parking lot where Sophia caught the bus each evening. Because this time, I'm not offering to take care of you, he said, without turning around. I'm asking you to take care of something we both believe in. The foundation will be independently funded and managed. Your salary will be competitive with any hospital administrator in the city, earned through your qualifications and performance, not our relationship. He turned back to face her, and Sophia saw vulnerability in his expression that wealth could never buy or hide. I'm not asking you to be my kept woman, Sophia. I'm asking you to be my partner in building something that matters. The clinic will exist whether you're with me personally or not, because the work is bigger than us. And if we're together, if we try this again, then we try as equals, Sebastian replied. To people who chose meaningful work over easy comfort, who decided that love was worth fighting for even when the odds seemed impossible. Sophia closed the folder, her hands shaking slightly. The media attention will come back, the speculation, the judgment, probably. But this time, they'll have to compete with stories about sick children getting the care they need, about a community clinic that's saving lives. Let them write about the romance if they want, but the real story will be the work we're doing. The silence stretched between them. It's filled with 3 weeks of pain and longing, and the terrible hope that maybe somehow they could find a way forward. I'm scared, Sophia admitted finally. So am I, Sebastian replied. But you told Isabella that the bravest princesses are the ones who feel scared, but choose courage anyway. Sophia looked up at him, and Sebastian saw his own desperate hope reflected in her eyes. If we do this, she said slowly, we do it right. No shortcuts, no. Using your wealth to smooth over problems we should face together. If people judge us, we face that judgment as partners. Partners, Sebastian agreed, the word carrying more weight than any contract he'd ever signed. Sophia stood and walked to where he waited by the window. This time, when she reached for his hands, there was no hesitation, no careful distance between them. I love you, she said simply. Not your money, not what you can provide, but you. The man who heard a fairy tale and decided to help write a better ending. I love you too, Sebastian replied, and when he kissed her, it tasted of possibility and second chances. 6 months later, the Rothwell Martinez Pediatric Clinic held its opening ceremony. The media coverage focused not on scandal, but on a revolutionary healthcare model that was already being replicated in cities across the country. Sophia, in her role as director, gave interviews about community health initiatives and pediatric care access, while Sebastian discussed the foundation's expansion plans. They worked side by side, partners in every sense of the word, building something larger than either could have created alone. When photographers captured them together, the images showed to people united by purpose rather than divided by circumstance. The fairy tale Sophia had been reading to Isabella that day came true in ways neither had expected. The princess did find her happy ending, not in a castle or a crown, but in the courage to choose love over fear, meaning over comfort, and partnership over the safety of solitary struggle. In the pediatric ward of their clinic, where Isabella now volunteered reading to younger patients during her remission, the same magic lived that had first brought Sebastian and Sophia together. Children's laughter echoed through halls funded by wealth, but animated by love, proof that some stories really could have perfect endings for those brave enough to write them.